The sun bathed the small town in a golden glow as wedding bells chimed in the distance, a symbol of love and new beginnings. To the outside world, Adam and Layla were the perfect couple, young, beautiful, and deeply in love. Their wedding was the talk of the town, a grand celebration of romance, tradition, and the promise of forever. But beneath the polished smiles and carefully planned ceremony lay unspoken fears and expectations that neither could openly confront. Adam was raised in a conservative family where honor and tradition dictated the rules of life. The eldest son of a respected businessman, he grew up believing that a woman's virtue was her greatest asset. His mother often reminded him that a wife's purity was the foundation of a strong marriage, an ideology passed down through generations. To Adam, love was important, but so was obedience. He envisioned his wife as a devoted partner who would embody everything he had been taught: loyalty, respect, and chastity. His love for Layla was unquestionable, but it was built on the foundation of his beliefs that he expected her to uphold without question. Though he lived in a modern world, Adam's mindset remained rooted in the past. His friends often joked that he was born in the wrong century, but he saw it as a badge of honor. He prided himself on being a man of values, someone who would build a family based on the same moral principles he was raised with. Layla, on the other hand, was a woman of quiet strength. Beautiful and intelligent, she was the kind of woman who could light up a room with her presence. She had dreams beyond marriage. She wanted to travel, to experience life, to build a career before settling down. But in a culture where a woman's future was often dictated by marriage, she learned to balance her personal desires with societal expectations. She met Adam through mutual friends, and their courtship was swift but passionate. He was charming, protective, and deeply devoted to her, qualities that made her fall in love quickly. But as the relationship deepened, she noticed his strict views on love, marriage, and, most of all, purity. Layla had a past, one she never spoke about, a single relationship, a moment of youthful passion, something she had long moved on from. She never considered it a mistake, but she knew that if Adam ever found out, he wouldn't see it that way. The weight of his expectations loomed over her, and she chose silence over confession. The engagement was picture perfect. Adam showered Layla with affection, making grand gestures of love that only made her fall deeper into the illusion of their perfect future. His family adored her, praising her for her beauty and grace. To them, she was the ideal bride, the kind of woman who would bring honor to the family name. The wedding was a grand affair. Hundreds of guests filled the lavish venue, dressed in their finest attire. Layla looked radiant in her white gown, a vision of purity and elegance. Adam stood beside her, proud and eager to claim her as his wife. As they exchanged vows, Adam squeezed her hand, whispering, "I can't wait to start forever with you." Layla smiled, but deep inside, her heart pounded with uncertainty. The weight of her unspoken truth pressed against her chest. Would Adam still love her if he knew? Would he still look at her the same way if he discovered she wasn't the untouched bride he expected? For a moment, she pushed the thoughts away. Tonight was about love, about the promise of a lifetime together. She convinced herself that love would triumph over everything else. But by the time the night was over, love would be the last thing on Adam's mind. The air buzzed with excitement as guests poured into the grand wedding hall, a magnificent venue adorned with cascading white roses and twinkling chandeliers. It was a night of celebration, a union of two souls, and for everyone in attendance, the beginning of a love story meant to last a lifetime. To the outside world, Adam and Layla were the perfect couple, handsome, deeply in love, and ready to embark on a new journey together. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing, unseen by the smiling faces and clinking champagne glasses. Layla stood in front of the mirror in the bridal suite, adjusting the lace on her gown as the makeup artist put the final touches on her face. She looked breathtaking, an image of perfection in a flowing white dress, the very embodiment of purity and grace. "You look stunning," her best friend, Miriam, whispered. "Adam won't be able to take his eyes off you." Layla smiled, but inside, her heart pounded. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, ensuring that everything was flawless. Yet, no amount of perfection could ease the growing tension in her chest. The weight of a secret she had carried for years now felt unbearable. Was love enough to make Adam look past his expectations? Could a lifetime of rigid beliefs be softened by the love they shared? Outside, Adam stood tall, his dark suit crisp, his expression one of quiet pride. His family surrounded him, offering final words of wisdom before he walked down the aisle. "Today you become a husband," his father said. "A man takes pride in his home, in his wife. Make sure she honors you in every way." Adam nodded, his jaw tightening. He had never doubted Layla's loyalty, but a lingering thought festered in the back of his mind. He had always imagined his wife as untouched, waiting for him the way he had waited for her. He shook off the thought. Today was a day of joy, and nothing would ruin it. As the music played, Layla walked down the aisle, her arm linked with her father's. The entire hall gasped in admiration. She was stunning, a bride straight out of a dream. Adam's eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, everything else faded. Whatever worries had lingered in his mind disappeared as he watched her approach. This was his wife, his future, the woman he had chosen to love and protect. The ceremony was beautiful, a blend of tradition and personal touches. They exchanged heartfelt vows, promising to honor and cherish each other forever. "I will love you in every lifetime," Adam whispered as he slid the ring onto her finger. Layla's smile faltered just for a second. She wanted to believe those words, needed to believe them. As the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Adam leaned in and kissed her gently. The crowd erupted in applause, and for that moment, they truly seemed like the happiest couple in the world. The reception was a grand affair. Music, laughter, and an endless flow of food and drinks. Guests took turns congratulating the couple, praising them for their love story. Adam was the perfect husband, never leaving Layla's side, his hand resting protectively on her waist. He watched her with adoration, proudly showing her off to the world. "She's a gem," one of his uncles said. "You're a lucky man." "I know," Adam replied with a smile. Layla played her part flawlessly, dancing, laughing, smiling at all the right moments. But inside, she was drowning in anxiety. She knew what awaited her once the celebrations were over. She knew that tonight would be the ultimate test of Adam's love. Miriam noticed her unease. Pulling her aside, she whispered, "Are you okay?" Layla hesitated before nodding. "Yes, just nervous." Miriam squeezed her hand. "It's normal. Every bride feels that way." Layla forced a smile. But this wasn't just nerves, this was fear. As the night came to an end, Adam and Layla bid farewell to their guests. The car waiting outside was ready to take them to the luxurious honeymoon suite Adam had booked for their first night as husband and wife. As they drove away, Adam reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "We made it," he said softly. Layla smiled, but her hands were cold. The city lights blurred past them as they approached the hotel. The night was perfect, the beginning of a new chapter. But little did Layla know, it would also be the last night of her life. The honeymoon suite was breathtaking. A luxurious space filled with soft candlelight, white rose petals scattered across the bed, and the faint sound of classical music playing in the background. Everything was set for the perfect wedding night. A night meant to be remembered for love, passion, and the start of a new life together. Adam closed the door behind them, locking the world outside. He turned to Layla, his eyes filled with hunger and devotion. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment he had imagined countless times. His heart pounded with excitement. Layla, however, stood frozen near the bed, her fingers gripping the lace of her wedding gown. The weight of the night pressed heavily on her chest. She had spent the entire evening putting on a perfect smile, playing the role of the flawless bride. But now there was no more hiding. The secret she had carried for so long, the truth she feared would destroy everything, was about to come to light. Adam stepped forward, gently brushing a strand of hair from Layla's face. "You're so beautiful," he whispered, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "Tonight is ours." Layla forced a smile, nodding slightly. Yes, ours. She wanted to believe it would be okay. That Adam's love for her would be strong enough to withstand anything. That he would see her for who she was, not for the past she could never erase. As Adam helped her out of her gown, his hands were careful, reverent, as if unwrapping something precious. His kisses trailed down her neck, his touch gentle yet filled with desire. But as the moment deepened, Layla's body tensed. Her breath hitched, and her heartbeat roared in her ears. She braced herself for the inevitable. Then it happened. The shift in Adam's expression, the moment of realization. His touch faltered, his breath hitched. His hands, once tender, suddenly withdrew as if burned. The passion in his eyes darkened, replaced by something far more dangerous. Confusion, disbelief, rage. Layla saw it happen in real time, the tightening of his jaw, the way his nostrils flared as his entire body went rigid. He pulled back as though she had just betrayed him in the worst way imaginable. His voice, when it finally came, was eerily quiet. Layla? His breathing was heavy, uneven. Tell me this isn't true. Her stomach twisted. Adam. Tell me. His voice rose, echoing through the suite. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling exposed, vulnerable. Adam, please. I love you. You lied to me. His tone was sharp, cutting through her like a blade. You told me you were pure, that you were untouched. Tears welled in her eyes. I never said that. I didn't think it mattered. Adam let out a hollow laugh, but there was no humor in it. Only bitterness. Didn't matter? He stepped closer, his presence towering over her. It mattered to me, Layla. It mattered more than anything. She reached for him, but he jerked away. Please, Adam. I love you. Does one mistake. A mistake. His voice was deadly calm now, his fury simmering beneath the surface. You let another man have what was supposed to be mine. Layla's body trembled. Adam, we're married. We can move past this. But she could see it in his eyes. There was no moving past this. Not for him. To Adam, she wasn't the woman he had married just hours ago. She was a fraud, a disgrace, a betrayal of everything he believed in. And in that moment Layla knew she was in danger. Adam's hands curled into fists at his sides, his breaths ragged. His mind raced, a storm of emotions crashing into him all at once. Love, betrayal, fury. She lied. A voice in his head whispered. She made a fool of you. His world tilted, his vision narrowing. The walls of the honeymoon suite seemed to close in around him. The candles flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Layla took a cautious step back. Adam, please, let's talk. But Adam wasn't listening anymore. His hands moved before his mind could stop them. The last thing Layla saw was the man she loved lunging toward her, his face twisted in rage. Then came the darkness. The honeymoon suite, once a symbol of love and new beginnings, had become a prison of suffocating silence. The candlelight flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls. As the air thickened with unspoken rage, Adam stood motionless, his chest rising and falling in heavy, uneven breaths. His fists clenched so tightly that his nails dug into his palms. Layla trembled, stepping backward, her bare feet cold against the marble floor. She could see it in his eyes. The man she had fallen in love with was gone. In his place stood a stranger, a man whose fury burned hotter than any love he had ever claimed to have for her. Adam! Her voice wavered, desperate to reach him, to pull him back from the edge. Please listen to me. But he wasn't listening. His thoughts spiraled, drowning in the storm of his own rage. The betrayal was unbearable. He had spent his life waiting for the perfect wife, the untouched bride who would belong to him and him alone. And now she stood before him, a lie wrapped in white silk. You disgust me, he seethed through clenched teeth. Tears streamed down Layla's face as she shook her head. Adam, I love you. This doesn't change anything. His laugh was cold, sharp. It changes everything. Then, before she could react, he moved. In a blur of motion, Adam's hand struck Layla's face, sending her stumbling backward. A sharp gasp escaped her lips as she crashed against the bed, her vision spinning from the force of the blow. Her hand flew to her cheek, the stinging pain spreading like wildfire. Adam! But he was already on her, his hands grabbing her wrists, pinning her down. His face hovered inches from hers, his breath hot with rage. Did you think you could deceive me? He hissed. That I wouldn't find out? Layla struggled, but Adam's grip was unrelenting. Panic surged through her veins as she realized just how strong he was, how easily he could overpower her. I trusted you, he roared, his fingers tightening around her throat. Layla gasped, her hands clawing at his arms, desperate for air. Her vision blurred, dark spots dancing before her eyes. She tried to speak, to plead, but the words never came. Only a weak, choked sound that barely escaped her lips. Adam's grip trembled, his mind warring with itself. He had never thought of himself as a violent man. But tonight, something inside him had snapped. The betrayal, the humiliation, it all consumed him. Then, for a brief second, his grip loosened, and Layla coughed violently, her chest heaving for air. Tears streamed down her face as she croaked, Please, Adam, I love you. But love meant nothing to him now. Adam's eyes darkened, his face a mask of pure wrath. You were never mine, he whispered. You never deserved to be my wife. His hands wrapped around her neck once more, this time with crushing force. Layla's body convulsed beneath him, her hands weakly pushing at his arms. Her lungs burned, her body screaming for oxygen. But Adam didn't stop. Seconds felt like hours as her struggles grew weaker, until finally, they stopped altogether. Layla's hands fell limp. Her eyes, once full of love and hope, stared lifelessly at the ceiling. The room fell silent. Adam remained there, his hands still around her throat, his chest heaving. It took him several moments to realize what he had done. The woman he had vowed to love and cherish, the woman he had married just hours ago, was gone. A shaky breath escaped him as he slowly pulled away, staring at her motionless body. His hands trembled, covered in the evidence of his rage. The weight of his actions crashed down on him like a tidal wave. His perfect wedding night had turned into a nightmare. The first rays of dawn slipped through the curtains of the honeymoon suite, casting a golden hue over the room. Outside, the world continued as if nothing had happened. Birds chirped, waves crashed against the shore, and the hotel bustled with early morning preparations. Inside the suite, however, time had frozen. Adam sat on the edge of the bed, his hands trembling in his lap. His eyes remained fixed on Layla's lifeless body sprawled across the mattress, her once radiant wedding dress now wrinkled and disheveled. The soft glow of the morning sun illuminated her pale face, her lifeless eyes staring at the ceiling in eternal silence. For a moment he thought, maybe she'll wake up. Maybe this is just a terrible dream. But it wasn't. She was dead, and he had killed her. The memories of the night before played in his mind like a broken record. The betrayal, the anger, the moment his hands had tightened around her throat, the way she had fought, then suddenly stopped. Adam's breath hitched. His fingers traced over the bruises forming around her neck, his own handiwork staring back at him. What have I done? His mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Regret, fear, disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. Their wedding night was meant to be a beginning, not an end. He wiped his face with shaky hands, but the guilt clung to him like a second skin. He had to think. He had to fix this. Adam forced himself to stand, his knees weak beneath him. He staggered toward the bathroom, splashing cold water on his face. His reflection in the mirror was unrecognizable. Eyes bloodshot, face pale, the image of a man undone by his own rage. His heart pounded. He couldn't just stay here. Someone would come looking for them, hotel staff, family, friends. And when they did, they would find Layla's body, and then a fresh wave of panic crashed over him. Prison, trial, the death penalty. No, he couldn't let that happen. He had to get out. His mind raced for solutions. Could he make it look like an accident? A suicide? A robbery gone wrong? He turned back toward the bed, staring at Layla's motionless form. No, it wouldn't work. There were bruises on her neck, marks that told a story of struggle and violence. No one would believe it was anything but murder. Then what? A knock at the door sent a jolt of fear through him. Mr. and Mrs. Carter? A woman's voice called from outside. Good morning. We have breakfast service for the newlyweds. Adam's breath caught in his throat. His heart pounded so loudly he thought it might give him away. He didn't answer. Seconds passed. Then a pause. Then a second knock, this time more firm. Sir? Ma'am? Adam's mind screamed. He had to act. Swallowing the lump in his throat, he took slow, measured steps toward the door. He pressed his back against it, steadying his breathing before responding. No, thank you, he called out, his voice hoarse. We're still sleeping. A brief silence. Then the woman's polite response. Of course, sir. Just let us know if you need anything. Footsteps faded down the hall. Adam exhaled, his hands shaking as he turned the lock. He had bought himself some time, but not much. He needed a way out, and fast. His suitcase was still packed in the corner. If he left now, he could disappear. He could get to the airport, fly somewhere far away, start over. But what about Layla? The thought of leaving her there, cold and alone, made his stomach twist. He had loved her. He still did. But love wouldn't save him now. Love had turned into something else. Something dark, irreversible. His hands curled into fists. He had no choice. Taking one last look at Layla, Adam turned toward the door and ran. It didn't take long for hotel staff to grow suspicious. By noon, housekeeping arrived to clean the honeymoon suite, expecting to find the newlyweds basking in the glow of their first morning together. Instead, they were met with a horrific sight. Layla's lifeless body sprawled across the bed, her skin pale, the unmistakable bruises around her neck telling a chilling story. The screams of the housekeeper echoed through the hotel halls, drawing staff and guests to the scene. Within minutes, the police were called. The honeymoon suite, once a sanctuary of love, was now a crime scene. Detectives arrived swiftly, combing through the room for evidence. The bruising on Layla's neck pointed to manual strangulation. There was no doubt this was a homicide. The room showed no signs of forced entry, no indication of a struggle beyond the fatal encounter. And most telling of all, Adam Carter, the groom, was nowhere to be found. Authorities wasted no time in issuing a warrant for Adam's arrest. Surveillance footage from the hotel captured him leaving the suite in a hurry just hours after the murder. He hadn't checked out formally, nor had he informed anyone of his departure. His phone was turned off, his credit cards unused. It was clear. He was on the run. Interpol was alerted, airports were monitored, and border patrols were notified. But Adam had vanished into thin air. For weeks, investigators chased leads. Rumors surfaced that he had fled to another country, possibly under an alias. Others believed he had taken his own life, unable to face the consequences of what he had done. But it wasn't until a month later, on a quiet evening in a small village in South America, that Adam Carter was found. A tip from a local led authorities to a rundown motel where he had been hiding under a false identity. When police burst into the room, they found him alone, disheveled, and gaunt, as if the weight of his crime had physically drained him. There was no struggle when they arrested him. Adam simply held out his hands, as if he had been expecting them all along. Adam's arrest sparked a media frenzy. Headlines painted him as the monster groom, a man who had taken a vow to love and protect, only to kill his bride on their wedding night. The trial began 6 months later, and the courtroom was packed with journalists, activists, and grieving family members. Layla's parents sat in the front row, their faces hollow with loss. Her mother wept openly, clutching a framed photo of her daughter in her wedding dress, the last image they had of her alive. Adam, dressed in an orange prison jumpsuit, sat emotionless as the prosecution laid out the case against him. They presented forensic evidence. Layla's autopsy confirmed that she had died from strangulation. The timeline of events, the lack of forced entry, and Adam's immediate disappearance all pointed to one undeniable truth. He was guilty. The prosecution painted Adam as a controlling, insecure man whose obsession with purity drove him to commit murder. They argued that his actions weren't a crime of passion but a premeditated act of violence, fueled by rage and entitlement. Adam's defense team, on the other hand, attempted to plead diminished responsibility. They argued that he had suffered an emotional breakdown upon discovering Layla's past, claiming he had acted in the heat of the moment. But the jury wasn't convinced. After deliberating for only 3 hours, they returned with a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. On the day of sentencing, Adam finally spoke. "I loved Layla," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant to hurt her, but I couldn't control myself." His words did nothing to sway the judge. Adam Carter was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A gasp filled the courtroom. Layla's family clung to each other, relief and sorrow intertwining. Justice had been served, but it would never bring their daughter back. As Adam was led away in handcuffs, he cast one last glance at the gallery. His eyes met Layla's mother's for a fleeting second before he was taken out of the courtroom, disappearing into the fate he had sealed for himself. Layla's tragic murder became a cautionary tale, a story of how love, when twisted by obsession and control, could turn into something deadly. Her family started a foundation in her name, advocating for awareness on intimate partner violence. They traveled across the country, speaking to young women about the dangers of controlling relationships, hoping that no one else would suffer the same fate as their daughter. As for Adam, he spent the rest of his days behind bars, his once promising life reduced to a cold prison cell. No visitors, no appeals, just the haunting memory of what he had done. And every night, as he lay in the darkness, he saw her face, the woman he had sworn to love, the woman he had destroyed, and he knew no sentence, no punishment, would ever compare to the prison of his own mind.